All right, recording in progress. I'll say it again. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Speculative Sundays Poetry Reading Series for Speculative Poetry Month. This is our final reading in the series for Speculative Poetry Month. We are live on Facebook via Zoom. I am Akua Leslie Hope, speaking to you from the ancestral land of the Onondaga, also known as the Seneca, keepers of the Western Door, in the area currently known as the Southern Finger Lakes region of New York State. I pay homage to the Seneca, past, present, and future, as I do to my own ancestors by whose grace I exist and am sustained. The series is made possible in part by an artist development grant from the Arts Council of the Southern Finger Lakes, funded by the Community Foundation of Elmira-Corning and the Finger Lakes, and by poets and writers with public funds from the New York State Council on the Arts. This year, the Statewide Community Regrant Program, a re-grant program of the New York State Council on the Arts, with support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature, administered by the Arts Council of the Southern Finger Lakes, enables us to be here. Thank you, funders. The reading is being recorded, so if you have concerns, please turn your camera off. Otherwise, you will be seen. Let me tell you a bit about this series. Inaugurated in September 2020, the Speculative Sundays reading series seeks to remediate the paucity of presentations of speculative poetry by its living creators. Now in its 6th year, the Speculative Sundays Poetry Reading Series has presented over 50 hour-long events, including over 80 poet readings. Speculative poetry, ancient of days, older than the flood, the poetry of possibility, centers the imagined as real. The first recorded human literature was speculative verse. Gilgamesh, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Iliad and Odyssey, and Beowulf are ancient examples. Speculative poetry includes alternate history, apocalyptic, astropoetry, cryptid, cyberpunk, dystopian, fabulism, fairy tales, fantasy, folklore, futurism, horror, magic, monsters, mythology, occult, paranormal, post-apocalyptic, robots, romantasy, science fiction, shifters, slipstream, solar punk, solar funk, space opera, superheroes, supernatural, sword and sorcery, sword and soul, steampunk, time travel, utopian, and weird. It takes all poetic forms, plus one of its own called sci-fi coup. From nursery rhymes to Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, from Puff the Magic Dragon to Zombie Jamboree, we've all recited and sung speculative poetry. You can find this series recordings on the Speculative Poetry YouTube channel, and a list of past poets is on our website. So now to our fabulous poets for the evening, Angela Acosta and Alicia Hilton, and we'll begin with Angela Acosta, Ph.D. She, her is an assistant professor of Spanish at the University of South Carolina. She's a 2022 finalist in the Dream Foundry Contest for Emerging Writers and an honorable mention in 2022 Somos and Escrito Extra Fiction Contest. Her Rhysling and Best of the Net nominated poetry has appeared in Heartlines Spec, Shoreline of Infinity, Apparition Lit, Radon Journal, and Space and Time. She's author of the Elgin nominated poetry collections, Summoning Space Travelers in 2022, and A Belief in Cosmic Dailiness. I love that collection, 2023. Her chapbook, Fourth Generation Chicana, is now available with Dancing Girl Press. Welcome, Angela Acosta.
Thank you so much, Akua, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be with everyone virtually today, especially since I'm actually teaching about science fiction and fantasy writing in a course I'm teaching this semester. So it's been really fun to return to some of my works in light of all of the things that we're reading in Spanish. So today I'll be sharing some recent-ish poems, some more than others. A couple of these first ones will be from this year, that most of which I haven't read before, so I'm really excited to share them. So this first piece is titled Smiling at Wisteria, and it's from Voices and Visions. That's a literary magazine for students and alumni of historically women's colleges, which is, I think, now on its second issue. So this is Smiling at Wisteria. It had been too long since I knelt on solid ground. Breathing exercises did little good. Calm in, anxiety out. Check the pulse ox and pretend, just pretend. Imagine the illusion of stabilization with a planet much less predictable than home, much more sterile in a spacesuit, recycling everything we brought from our flying lab. When we found the wisteria, perilously hanging over the green-tinted water, she looked like a damsel spreading her perfumed locks over the lecho, the river's bed. She smiled at me, personified plant, graceful and sublime, cooling my senses. For a second, sweet wisteria, I lapsed in protocol and allowed myself to finally adapt my earth-tinted lungs. My fully living friend smelled aromatic, desirable, a taste of a planet that could adapt to my too small lungs and unruly hair. In the embrace of wisteria, I sank to my knees and listened for the rest of the welcome delegation. This next piece is also going to take us off-world, and I encourage you to get your pencils out for this one because it's Proxima Centauri word problem number 7, also from Voices and Visions. Proxima Centauri word problem number 7. How do you calculate, through triangulation, circumnavigation, or the bravery of your own heart, the atmospheric composition of an exoplanet? Do you scribble down formulas and show all your organic mathematical work, dendrites alight? Or do you nurture 8 generations of scientists, children trained in the lab bench and the arts of old, to get accurate percentages and run statistical analyses afforded by a dozen scouting missions? Will you meet with the elders who made those first hard decisions as we found worlds beyond our own? Will you work silently on your own, or will your mind hum in time with your species? You have a digital toolkit attached to this question. Submit your work before the next transit of our sister planet. So I'll let you muse about the answer to that word problem, and read a very short piece titled Hush from Ionosphere Volume 1, Issue 2. Hush. You wished me tranquil, wished me refined, and frozen like an asteroid. My lips spilled secrets long before our orbits crossed. I cried out and said the universe consisted of a quiet hush, feminine and sublime, trailing music notes with comets while nebulae danced in possibility. And now going from that one to a bit of a longer piece, where I was thinking about world building and imagining a very solar punk future. There was a special issue of the Mythilla Review that came out titled Planet Democracy, Stories of Hope, Courage, Unity, and Compassion. And so I put together this narrative poem titled Paradise of the Abyss about this possible future, possible planet. Paradise of the Abyss. Piedad launched herself over the city's crater, from the heart of paradise of the abyss, a beacon of new ecologies, twirling out multi-species habitats of tropical flora and fauna, where crest-raised Piedad could live a life of creativity and abundance. No stranger to thrust, she careened skyward over rock formations, spilling art into the hearts of billion-year-old terrestrial rocks. It was like a children's game, gaining altitude as she shot flower seeds onto newly tilled soil. Only 16, she was already terraforming craters, letting landscapes dictate farmlands and wild spaces, all granted from a fateful asteroid collision on what the Maya once knew as the Yucatan Peninsula, millions of years before humanity's new beginning. Paradise of the Abyss was never a metropolis or site of political power loaded with cement and concrete that stifled lives and climates, but a burgeoning civilization of languages and cultures settled into revitalized limestone caverns and underwater harvests. To live here, a home known as Paraíso del Abismo, allows Piedad to connect to million world networks of planetoids and starships light years across, using cables and screens made of sustainable metal alloys brought down from San Luis Potosí. Every off-world call renews her spirituality, a pantheism beyond the dreams of romantic poets, for she forges a true cosmic connection between terrestrial life, brought into the 23rd century to stave off mass extinctions, and a human instinct, tethering her to wayward comets and the whole galaxy. Grateful for this existence, she remains curious yet mindful of her place in the vastness of the cosmos. Piedad spoke 4 languages with ease, tended to human and avian friends with care, as she studied to one-day voyage past the solar system, where she could bring paradise of the abyss to new stars, not to colonize, but to make comfortable, livable futures, replacing fierce competition and rushed quotidian rhythms with love, companionship, and the humility of tending to the self and to the planet. Like kind of an alternate retelling of what the Yucatan Peninsula could be in the future. This next one will be a bit more on the comedic side. This one's titled Safety Notice from Apparition, the webzine of science fiction and fantasy, and it is indeed a safety notice that all should heed. Safety notice. We regret to inform you that a cat chewed through a wire in the particle accelerator again. The physicists all joked that the feline would find cat ions in the data. Please stand clear of any radioactive kitty litter. The containment team is working to neutralize the catnip growing around the research facility. We recommend a Geiger counter in hand and pet cat in tow, for how else can you tiptoe through multiple dimensions and quantum states? Please poke around the standard model with your expert particle hunter. You may end up with 2 kitties when there was only one, or ghosts in the solenoids when a whole litter switches positions and suddenly Alpha Centauri starts reporting its first sentient life, domestic cats. Thank you for the reactions for that one. This next piece that I'll be reading is from the Polaris trilogy. So this is a selection of poetry and art that was put together in codices or anthologies to be sent to the moon. And this particular, the Lunar Codex, this particular group of writings and art was arrived on the moon on March 6, 2025, which is really cool. It's one of these initiatives through the Artemis Accords to preserve world heritage through, different artistic and literary endeavors. And so they're trying to connect these writings from Earth to sites of specific importance on the moon. And Brick Street Poetry is the group that put together the Polaris trilogy. And so they brought poets from all over the world to share their work specifically on the theme of the moon in this case, since that's where the writings were sent. So with all that, this piece is titled Illuminated. It's a play on words, of course, with Luna. So yeah, it's really neat to have my work on another planet, or another stellar body, I suppose. Illuminated. Luna, our closest satellite, bathed in light from Sol for eons, its face the same as days of old, one day will shine with man's first torch, a touch of neon upon its cratered surface. Illumination signals spacecraft and commerce, attracting visitors to its empty oceans, a myriad of habitats surrounding the planetoid. Lights will guide travelers and adventurers skyward, reaching tourist attractions and astrobiology labs through a short weekend jaunt skyward. Now we have passed a threshold of progress, believing our solar-powered lights will usher in a new age of spacefaring, forgetting once more to admire the mysteries of the darkness. So kind of thinking about what could happen on the moon as we establish a human presence and what these artificial lights might hide from those of us living there. I think this next piece will have a bit of a similar theme. This is A Refusal to be Starborn from Dreams and Nightmares, issue 123 from January of 2023. A Refusal to be Starborn. Engines roar over the wail of carbon emissions and landslides as Mars ascends high in the sky. After white men stepped on the moon, their spiritual successors shall colonize Mars, making the rest of us indentured astronauts. Grand they will be, hydrogen fusion rockets hum in time to heartbeats, overstepping the atmosphere. I burrow into the earth, shielding her from the stars above, nesting myself in her loamy soil. On this day, I will not go with them, not yet, when I can breathe unaided, walk untethered, and live fully on this mottled globe, for I will be a good ancestor. Thank you. Let's see, I have a few more pieces I'd like to share. This one is titled Done Away with the Light Years. And it's kind of thinking about what would happen if you went too far into the future, if you somehow had the technology to blast away faster than the speed of light. What would you do when you've gone too far and no one else can reach you? And this poem's from Frivolous Comma. Done away with the light years. By 2100, I had sold my family names for a faster than light ship, turned flesh into synthetic organs, digitized my core memories, and walked away from the heartbreak of mortality. I thought I had done away with the deceit of human generations, the tug of the best is yet to come, so I sang a tale of cosmic expansion and endless seas. How would I ever regret doing away with the light years, scratching colliding particles with heat shields and falling away from the galactic ecliptic? I wished you away for distant worlds covered in wavelengths you can't see. I wished you away and lost my whole community. I wished you away eons before I even took off. When we come back round to Earth, what was once us will have never been. The continents will have already washed over my shame. Thank you. Let's see. I now have another piece from 2023 from On Spec, which is a fabulous Canadian science fiction and fantasy magazine. And this also is kind of a similar sort of thought experiment about the distant future and how we will remember these cosmic events and locations so far removed from the present. The title is Music of the Spheres, which is, of course, an allusion to the Baroque musical idea, the Baroque idea that the planets are making noise as the music of the spheres, as the heavenly bodies are going through their orbits. They're somehow creating music, and so I use that as inspiration for this piece. Music of the Spheres. I dream of a galactic funeral, an orchestra of heavenly spheres foretold by Baroque musicians and accretion discs alike. If sound waves are guitar chords, then stellar collisions and explosions will burst like a drum set as the universe cools and dies. All galactic events are polyrhythmic, light years apart, yet joined in intention. Supernovas illuminate the concert hall as black holes quiet the audience. The last humans to leave Sol behind will deposit familiar artifacts, a 25th century music box, an unending melody for future visitors. Anything we make will burn. Anything our bodies create will expire. But photons and sound waves will cross chasms of emptiness, resonating across the vacuum of space. So hopefully that didn't evoke too much existential dread there with the music of the spheres. Let's see. I think I might have time for maybe two more poems or so. This next piece also has kind of an idea behind it. I think a number of my pieces have something to do with Latinx culture and the way in which we can bring the many diverse cultures and languages of the Western Hemisphere to the future, to space, to a future Earth. So this particular poem takes the requerimiento as a thought experiment. So the requerimiento or requirement in English was something that the conquistadors made the indigenous peoples of the Americas respond to, even though they, of course, didn't have the language to basically signal that Spain had the authority by the Spanish crown to then, conquer these lands and have them recognize that as their authority. And so I've thought about what that might look like as someone arriving on an exoplanet and having conflicted thoughts about their own arrival on another land. And this is titled First Sojourn. Against the calm hum of artificial gravity, my first exoplanetary foray, 4 generations deep, clenches neural networks into a colorful cacophony of senses and sentience as we descend at Mach 15. Suddenly, hills and valleys come into view, and I call upon my ancestral tongues to name all that was retained in our morphology: colina, hill; vega, valley; tierra, earth; laguna, lagoon. I imagine these Spanish words once spoken by malevolent voices, by conquistadores en las Americas, so I ground myself on cushioned 0.75G soil by sending a message to the sky and building an hogar, hearth, and home. I set off into dusty woodlands as nettles prickle my skin. I almost think for a moment that AI is wafting evergreen trees into my olfactory receptors. Cresting over a hill, I recite the new requerimiento, rewriting Columbus, to nurture xenobiology and honor all life, free of any ruler over planetary bodies. Firm in the belief of this testimony, my compadres and comadres bear witness and kneel to a humble offering of synthesized foods and centuries one quantum physics. We will make mistakes, transitioning back into our own flesh. But here we put newly told stories in our bellies and exchange astronomical calculations for a cozy humility and quiet wonderment. Thank you. Let's see. I think I'll end with what has kind of become a favorite of mine. I've read it before. It's Rewilding the Axolotl. I think it'll end on a cheerful note. And this is from Starline, Volume 47, Number 2. Rewilding the Axolotl. Some of the smallest survivors of the Mexica civilization live underwater, bobbing along Lake Xochimilco like before the conquest. Here their stories float with little bubbles, all-knowing smiles, wise with generations of treacherous secrets. When the lakes became congested with processions, algae strewn like fallen papel picado and trash, the axolotls domesticated themselves, breathing air in unison for the first time. They complained about their living conditions, thus convincing humans to shelter these forever young amphibians, tickled pink with their charm. Lab-grown rambunctious amphibians vied for a prime spot in the ISS student experiments, crawling aboard among plant seeds and cardboard cutout solar panels. These almost stowaways made it to the Lunar Gateway, then on to Mars, where they would dive and dine in waters melted from frozen rocks. The rewilded axolotls were known to climb out of the water to watch rocket launches, never desiring to go further than their one perfect pond on the Martian surface. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to take questions at the end.
Oh, Angela, that was so lovely. Wise with generations of treacherous secrets. Axolotls are so adorable, but what that was so you ended with such a beautiful visual, and it made me think, you've got to get someone to do an anime of that poem. That needs to be, I mean, that's so cinematic and filmic right there. And your Paradise of the Abyss, I just wanted to, mention that there is an anime about, I forget the title of it, but I think Abyss is in the title of it. It's so shocking and terrible, and that you envision the paradise of the abyss, the ways in which terraforming is not as intrusive as it might be, when it's done with a good heart. Thank you very, very much. Okay, now our next poet for this evening is Alicia Hilton.
Hello, very glad to be here, and thank you for listening.
I'm going to introduce you.
Oh, fantastic.
I only took a breath. I'm sorry if the pause was too long. See,
no, that's okay.
She's ready, folks, but I want you to know a little bit about her before she reads. She's an author, editor, attorney, professor, and former FBI special agent. This is a superwoman. Her poetry's been nominated for the Rhysling Award and the Dwarf Stars Award. Her work has appeared in Breakwater Review, Eastern Iowa Review, Gamut, Litro, Modern Haiku, Dyslexia, Stoneboat Literary Journal, Strange Horizons, The Quarterly, Vestarian, the year's best hardcore horror, volumes 4, 5, and 6, and elsewhere. You can find her at AliciaHilton.com, follow her on Twitter, and find her on Blue Sky, Alicia Hilton with the Blue Sky Social. Welcome, ever ready, Alicia Hilton.
Thank you. The first poem that I'm going to read is from the anthology Alternative Holidays. And if you look in the chat, you will see that there is a chance to get free stuff from the poets, and you could get a free paperback copy of this anthology from me. So sign up. So this is a poem that I wrote called Candy Canes and Brimstone. It's a little scary, so hopefully you won't be too freaked out. Candy canes and brimstone. A murmuration of demons flew from the river of fire. 98 monsters, large, small, and microscopic, shrieking, hissing, leathery, feathery, and fanged. The most depraved flock of all, summoned by sleigh bells and scents of mulled wine, peppermint, and human flesh. Christmas Day in Hades, the most aromatic and horrific holiday. Fallen angel Marlene swooped and dove past stalactites and stalagmites, leading Lucifer's minions through pulsing caverns. The intestines of the great beast, known as the underworld, were coated in luminous slime. Boulders shuddered exhaling energizing brimstone, inhaling demon secretions, a symbiotic relationship bound in blood and sin. A giant horned bat licked sulfurous powder from a stalactite, his eyes dilated. Guano shot from his butt. Boils on his back popped. He let go of the rock, spun like a top, and soared past Marlene. She unlatched the whip strapped to her hip, gave him a lash, crack. A zombified raptor hooted. Give him another lash, crack, crack. A headless witch cackled at the scarlet stripes crisscrossing the bat's back. Demons swooped after Marlene and the bat, 10 times faster than flying reindeer. What a very merry chase, full of bloodlust and Christmas cheer. The rowdy murmuration landed at the entrance to Lucifer's confectionery. Hooves stampeded through an iron gate, pushing, shoving past evergreens decorated with severed fingers and toes, following a cacophony of odoriferous delicacies, sweet, savory, and petrified, luscious meat sacks spiced with Christmas fear. Fallen angel Marlene collected fees at a second gate made from hissing snakes. Aisle 1, sweet, 1 incisor. Aisle 2, super sweet, 1 molar. Aisle 3, savory, 2 talons. Aisle 4, special surprise, 4 talons. Satan's minions tore teeth from gums, ripped talons from fingers and feet. Microscopic monsters freeloaded, clung to bloody demons as they surged down aisles. Aisle 1, sweet. 77 con artists were chained together in a steaming fountain filled with mulled wine. The scalded souls shouted the same lies they'd used to fleece unfortunate mortals. You'll double your money. It's a sure thing. You can't lose. Extended warranty. Money back guarantee. Aisle 2, super sweet. 12 nursing home orderlies packed tighter than sardines in 2 stainless steel barrels begged for mercy. But Satan never forgave cretins who abused old folks. A gong clanged, slots in the ceiling opened, melted candy canes poured into the barrels. Drowning the simmers in boiling peppermint. Aisle 3, savory. A neon sign advertised Christmas sale, 50% off. 44 naked serial killers hung from meat racks, hooks speared into their backs. A pack of laughing jackals and 9 demon pterodactyls pounced and swooped. Fangs and beaks tore throats, gored juicy bellies coated in caramel. Aisle 4, special surprise. 6 demons dressed as elves led a lassoed Santa, red-faced, shrieking. The monstrous imposter with a rented velvet suit had evaded 2 homes on Christmas Eve, toting a gun, rope, and cans of gasoline. He trussed and torched 4 adults, 5 kids, and a kitten. The Dark Lord materialized from a swirling cloud of surfless smoke, a hammer and nails clutched in his fist. Fallen angel Marlene dragged a wood cross towards the arsonist. She screamed profanity as Satan crucified Santa. Demons loathed kitten killers. And that's the end of my first poem. That is probably the creepiest one I'm going to read. So hopefully I didn't make anyone too squeamish. The next poem is something that occurs partially in outer space. And it is from the anthology Ornithology, which is an anthology of poems and stories that are related to birds. I happen to share my home with a pet parrot, and I love birds, so you will see that a number of my poems feature birds. So, my avian daughter devours meteors. Do you believe in astral projection? Not charlatan grifters who fake out-of-body experiences to separate gullible souls from hard-earned dollars. That's parasitic, asholic, inhumane, not miraculous like the avian creature who slithered from my vajayjay. My daughter is a glorious monster, born with a beak, a feathered face, and winged body. Her luminous gold crest fanned, forming a halo when I screamed. How could I not be terrified? Science says immaculate conception is impossible, yet Aurora wriggled beside me in the bathtub. Churr, churr, her throat vibrated. Tiny claws scampered at my calves, climbed, clinging so tight I feared she would bite, but the beak morphed to fleshy lips. She latched onto my nipple. My shrieks turned to whimpers. Mammaries swelled. Amazing lactation. 2 days later, I woke with a girl in my bed. Eerily familiar, the face was a mirror image of mine when I was 9. Freckled with buck teeth, she said, "Churr, churr." Aurora's soul left her body, floated on the ceiling, drifted out the window. I strapped on my gun, sprinted after her. The neighbor's hound barked, but no one else seemed to see the diaphanous flicker zoom past houses, apartments, the pharmacy. I found Aurora's shadow in a cemetery. Her invisible beak gobbled 2 granite headstones and a statue of Jesus. On her 3rd birthday, my avian daughter taught me how to leave my body. A hard tug, icy cold, indescribably weird. The sensation of parting from flesh and bones. Our souls traversed the Milky Way and feasted on meteors. Spicy and poignant, the mineral flavor clings to my teeth. I have not seen Aurora since December 31st, 2021. She said she wanted to become a black hole and swallow all the pain in the universe. The next poem I'm going to read also has to do with birds. It is called A Murder of Crows, and it was published by Ice Queen and was nominated for a Rhysling Award. And My Avian Daughter Devours Meteors was also nominated for a Rhysling Award. A Murder of Crows. The pied au gratin is magnificent, the waiter caws. What sort of foot? The husband squawks. Free range, organic, the waiter caws. He wears a pigeon's heart on his starched uniform. The wife wonders if the stiff material chafes. Her own corset is digging into her ribs. I'll take the pied au gratin, and my wife will have the kidney fricassee. Her husband knows that she loathes organ meat. She wants to squawk, but presses her beak together, silently reciting her calming mantra, sky, sky, sky. Azure with wispy clouds, she sees herself taking flight, gliding on an updraft, far, far away from the clatter in the dining room. The waiter wheels in a steel table with a naked man trussed on top, a gag in his mouth. Left or right foot, the waiter caws. The next poem I'm going to read is about a crime, and it's called April. It was published in J Journal, New Writing on Justice. April. I trudged up the hill, too cold to leave the jacket at home. The sunlit, chaste white faces of spotted toad lilies. The rose-breasted grosbeak warbled his joy. Up over the dew-crusted hill, at the end of the manicured glade, 349 feet from her new lemon yellow VW bug, beneath the bobbing heads of her purple flowering garlic, last week, my neighbor hid a secret. I'll bet he wished he'd never bought her the shovel. I should have known something was wrong when she smiled at me. Garlic smells musky, not like rotting meat. April was wearing red and black spotted boots, like the wings of a ladybug. The next poem I'm going to read is Oleander and Wolfsbane, and it was long-listed by Ellen Dotlow in her Best Horror of the Year anthology. So Oleander and Wolfsbane, bridal bouquet, her last cup of tea, his duplicity. Black dahlia, a corpse planted in his garden. Forget-me-not, paranoia haunts him. Moonflower, a white wolf's howl awakens her spirit. Resurrection lily, her corpse transforms. Wolfsbane, paws emerge from dirt. Angel's trumpet, her howls are as celestial as her silver fur. Crown of thorns, wolf claws scratch, killer, on his porch. Cherry blossoms, his sanity drifts into madness. Harvest time, the thresher chews his corpse. Wild lupine, the white wolf becomes her mate. And this next poem is another poem. It's a bit creepy. It's called 17 Tamarack Lane. 17 Tamarack Lane, a yellow cottage at the end of a deserted lane. The pentagram that guarded the gate, stolen, a hex in its place. Herbs in the yard shudder and weep. Bog blueberry whispers about treachery. Belted kingfishers rattle and scream, trying to summon help. 3 cats trapped in the cottage scratch at the door, pleading for freedom. A spider weaves a web across the bedroom, snaring shattered dreams. In the dark cellar, a yellow-haired witch is stuffed in the washing machine. And this next poem is one of my recent poems. It was just published in the Phantomicon, which is an anthology about ghosts. It's called The Moon is My Scrying Mirror. The cicadas were singing of treachery when I was initiated into the coven, sisters and name, not blood. What an imbecile I was to mistake conjured connection with family. Lilith, Sandrine, and Contrita smiled sweetly when they asked me to prove my loyalty. Slide the dagger across my wrist, fill their chalice. The blade was as cold as their hungry stares. 1 cup, not nearly enough. Slathering mouths suckled my wrist. Their canine teeth grew, punctured the pulses between my thighs. Tongues laved my life essence until I was nothing but a soul floating from the fleshy husk that used to be my body. Up to the dusty rafters I drifted, spinning like a moth with a broken wing. My hazy hands shattered an oared weaver's web, fangs snapping, the skittering brown arachnid chased my apparition through a cracked window pane. How could a ghost feel her heart beating? My pounding chest urged me to seek vengeance. My spirit lingered outside the cottage, listening to the vampires feeding on my corpse. Scents wafted from the herb garden, basil for strength, chamomile for calm, wormwood for clarity. My short life was filled with pain, but the night wanted to grant me peace. Drawn to the ground, I alighted, exhaling a relief as grass touched my feet. How strange! Even the cicada's song changed, becoming lyrical instead of discordant. I stepped away from the cottage, walking faster as my mood lightened. The balmy summer breeze beckoned, urging me to run to the lake. The woods echoed with whispers, ghostly voices welcoming me to their domain. Centipedes slithered across the moist dirt, tickled my naked, hazy feet. I plunged through the cattails, laughing. An owl hooted, drawing my gaze to the moon. The glowing orb shimmered, a beacon of hope shining upon the lake. The next poem also features a ghost, but it's a bit humorous. Hot dog and ectoplasm. My dog and I share an addiction, ectoplasm. There's no greater joy for a corgi with a sixth sense than hunting ghosts in Central Park. Luna yipped at auras, while ordinary dogs chased balls. A snort of spiritual essence from an apparition wearing a pinstripe suit, strolling past the zoo. A dead ringer for Frank Sinatra. I opened my eyes wide and inhaled shimmering euphoria. Old Blue Eyes tasted like starlight and lemon meringue pie. The sun was setting when Luna and I arrived at the pond. No other pedestrian saw the phantom grab the woman feeding the ducks. The ghost's gray aura turned crimson when Corgi Jaws chomped his leg. Some spirits bled, tail wagging deliciousness. And now I'm going to read something that is not creepy, but a bit funny. This was actually inspired by my pet parrot, and it's called My Sun Breathes Fire. Do you believe in magic? Not the hallucinations you see from eating magic mushrooms or LSD. That's bullshit. I've seen the real thing. Had it bite me. My second child is a dragon, an orange-eyed, black-tongued, claw-footed, winged beast. Hatched from an egg, I squirted ground fish meal, juice, and yogurt down his throat before he got strong enough to hunt. Got some flung in my holster. You've got to wear a gun when you're raising a dragon. Honk, honk, honk. He begged for flesh like a baby goose. Taught the beast to fly, too. Flapped my arms until he took off. I left him even after I bled. Still have scars where his claws scratched. When he was 4 months old, he said hello. 8 months later, the feathers on the back of his neck turned from green to yellow. Did you know dragons like dirty jokes and cop shows? Now he's learning opera, speaks in a baritone, sings like a tenor, wants to grow up to be Rolando Villazone, fan his tail, spread his wings, strut across the stage. And do I have time for another poem or should I end there? Yes, time? Okay. Let's see. I'll read a strange one. This is called The Anglerfish Lures a Mate. Indelibly ashamed, the secret pulsing through my back pocket, an invisible beacon of infamy on my ass. It's not like the word will end if they find out, my friend Nancy promised with an earnest smile after I showed her the extra cleft between my butt cheeks, tiny at first, no thicker than a fingernail, until it got hotter. Don't touch it, I cried as the gap widened, sucking Nancy inside. Of course I lied when her parents called. Nancy said she was going to the library. What would have been the use of telling the truth? People would have assumed I was crazy if I insisted that there was a girl hiding inside my derriere. Derriere. Grandma said nice girls don't say ass. She was beautiful. Not Grandma, Nancy. There's no use asking her to come out. Sometimes I wonder if I love Nancy too much. Not a girlish crush between two 9-year-olds. I never told Nancy how I felt, never tried to kiss her, but I used to fantasize we'd get married when we grew up. My family wonders why I don't date. I feel like an anglerfish who devoured her mate. I stopped hearing Nancy's heartbeat when I was 12. I'm going to read one more poem. It's a short one, and then we can do questions. The Oracle. No mortal being ever sees the old woman's lips moving. Mouthpiece of gods and goddesses, drop a coin in her cup. An immortal voice will prophesy from the sky. Cumulonimbus, only rumbling the truth when storm clouds are churning. Lightning bolts and wisdom flung from Ragnarok or Olympus. No one knows the source except perhaps the old woman. Nameless and ancient, she has been sitting in the olive grove for decades, eating nothing except the coins in her cup. They levitate and disappear, slipping between her lips magically. The gnashing metal sounds like bells and smells like history, blood-soaked togas, burning papyrus, reanimated mummies. The sun rises and sets on her wizened face, black eyes never blinking. Raindrops on her cheeks look like tears when the deity above speaks. I gave her a silver dollar and asked when I would die. The voice said, "The passage of the soul happens when it is meant to happen." The old woman stared at me with the poker face of an oracle. Thank you.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that was stunning.
Thank you.
And you read one of my favorite poems ever. My avian daughter devours meteors.
I love that poem.
But
sometimes I write some really strange things, and afterwards I don't know how I come up with them.
But it's what you do with the speculative, both of you. But what I see in what you're doing in the speculative is you're making it even more true than if it were literal, actual. I feel so deeply. I mean, every time I hear that poem, I want to cry and I miss my mommy. Mm-hmm. And your poem, similarly about the dragon's son, mm-hmm. is also so deeply, lovingly maternal and supportive. I hope everybody feels that and gets that, but I felt it so deeply. And then your outrageously horrific opening, I was just like, I wish I had that to send to people, because I've been screaming, complaining in every conversation of late. I don't know if other people in the audience feel that way, but I just want to affirm, across the street from me right now, blasting in my door, are Christmas lights that were put up the day after Halloween. And I imagined some of it. I'm like, oh, your poem was so cathartic. Your first poem. I was just, yes. Why the day after Halloween? Why is it not confined to its season? Why do I want to rush the year? Why do I want to have the year end on October 31st? Like, what's happened, And you help us combat chaos. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'll stop chatting. If people have questions, please put them in the chat. And let's see. Wonderful, pushes the imagination to the breaking point. I love the voices of your narrative poems. Alicia says you're your co-reader tonight. Yes, yes, yes. But I will add, why am I disappearing? See, I told you this, it's all about the light. I'm right here, folks. I'll ask a question I always ask poets, because I think it helps the audience connect. And so, would each of you speak to when you began writing poetry and how you came to speculative poetry? Alicia, your mic's
Sure.
That's the only reason I say that. And then
All right. I wrote my first poem when I was 12. I had an English teacher who basically told me I had to do it. There was a contest for high school students, and she thought I should write a poem for it. And so I did. It was the Oregon Zoo's poetry contest, and I wrote a poem about a lion, and I won the contest. So that was my first poem, and it wasn't speculative. It was, sort of straightforward about the lion and the roaring and all that. And then I've been writing poems on and off, ever since. And speculative, I think that my brain just works in a strange way. I like to write about nature a lot, but I like to combine things that I see with strange things that pop up in my imagination. And I definitely have a strange imagination. And so it's kind of inevitable. Once in a while, I write poems that are just straight poetry or just straight poems about human nature. But the sensationalistic, the strange, the weird, the otherworldly just often creeps into my work, even when I don't want it to. It's just there.
Angela?
Yeah, I think kind of similarly, I started kind of intentionally or just remembering that that was what I was doing, writing poetry when I was like just at the start of high school, and joined a writing club, and mostly wrote like, short stories, like little flash pieces during lunch period, and then gradually started writing more poetry. But I never really felt like I had my footing with like the what we call like the non-genre kind of literary poetry. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't really sticking with me, I guess, until when I was in graduate school. I ended up finding like a writing contest or something that was a little questionable, maybe a little fishy, but through that website and thinking about what kinds of poems I wanted to write, it was a resounding, I want to write like science fiction. How do I do that as a poet, right? Because I had been reading so many science fiction novels, a lot of the classics, a lot of the more recent ones. I had an absolutely amazing college course on Ursula Le Guin, and I wanted to get into, but as a poet. And so that eventually led me to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association as kind of my first stop in becoming a speculative poet and learning about all of these literary magazines and feeling really encouraged that everybody is not just writing one type of poem, but we have a whole world of speculative poetry, horror, science fiction, fantasy, you name it, it's in there. And so that for me was really, really great because I felt like I found my voice a lot more in the science fiction, which is still very much rooted in current day questions and concerns and people, but taking it towards a different, future or different location.
Yes, being a good ancestor. I take that charge from your poem with me, Angela. We've got one question and it's after 8, so but I do want, this is such a heartfelt question. I want to share it before we all part. What advice would you have for people wanting to improve their work? This person's in their first college poetry class, but they've been writing all their life, but they've only been doing it consistently this year. So what advice do you have for improvement?
I would say to read a lot, read across genres, not just poetry, but fiction, nonfiction. You need to read a lot. Also, get out in the world and observe things, observe nature, observe people. And when you're out there in the world, don't just look with your eyes, but listen, feel the wind. You want to use all your senses. And when you're writing, use all your senses. You don't need to use all your senses in each poem, but a lot of people will think about just writing about visual things. And it's important to write about the other senses because that really immerses the reader. And especially with poetry, every word should count. So you've got to cut out the unnecessary words and don't use vague, boring words. I would just say try to use more vivid, evocative words, but leave some room for the reader to use their imagination too. You need to do that. So that's my advice.
Angela?
Yeah, that was really great, Alicia. The submission guidelines at a lot of literary journals say don't forget to read, past issues to see if your work is a good fit. And maybe you don't have time to do that every single time, but definitely reading. And also working with editors if you are someone who wants to publish in literary magazines. I've found those to be really great experiences to see, like, okay, this is someone who liked my work, who wants to accept it. What did they admire about it? How can my work get even better? And some of them are really hands-on, and so like developing your writing craft through that it can be a really rewarding experience. And going off of what Alicia said about like experiencing the world, like the first poem I read, Smiling at Wisteria, was actually inspired by me going on a hike, and apparently we get a lot of wisteria in my part of South Carolina in like the late springtime, like in April. And it was really beautiful. And I'm like, what would it be like to be experiencing these sensations, but on another planet, where these sorts of like plants and things are rare, but also really neat beauties. So yeah, I think getting out in the world, even if it's just using writing prompts, and not being afraid to keep writing and to keep figuring out what your favorite genre is, or what your favorite medium is, and not being afraid to do hybrid work or experiment with those things.
I want to add one little practical tool that I try and tell everyone, which is write every day. So you ask about consistency, make an appointment that you're going to write daily. Now, what I will say to you is it could only need only be 5 minutes, but the dailiness of practice, it's like building up your muscles. And I second what they both said, and reading is critical. The best writers are great readers. So read, 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 but write daily. And with that, let me thank again Angela Acosta and Alicia Hilton for a wonderful, wonderful, enjoyable, explore sensuous, evocative, thought-provoking, warm, great, involving reading. And thank you, audience. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for joining us. I wish everybody health, peace, and safety, creativity. Keep listening, keep reading. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. That was wonderful.